Welcome to this videocast about how to migrate from a single instance MySQL to a full HA solution with MySQL InnoDB Cluster, and how we're going to migrate the live data with the clone plugin. So here we have a production server with an application connecting to the MySQL, and as you can see it creates some data, there is some load, right? You can see some commit, deletes and stuff like that. We can see that in the shell. So the application is sysbench currently. So we can see it's running. We're gonna reduce some load because my machine won't be very responsive when installing all the stuff because these are VMs, right? So I reduce the load and I let the application run. So we go back in the MySQL shell. You can see here that the session is reduced. We have now 4 sessions, but all doing commits, deleting. It's a full OLTP read-write workload. So first thing we're gonna do now is enable GTID on this instance, because we're gonna use it later. GTID are mandatory with InnoDB Cluster. So let's live migrate to GTID. So for doing this we need to do it in several steps. First we go in GTID mode 1, we go back in GTID mode 2, and finally we enable it completely. So it's off permissive, on permissive, and now on. Of course we're gonna put that in the configuration, so we set persist and force GTID consistency equal true, and then we go also with set persist GTID mode 3, which is on. So now we have enabled GTIDs on this single instance 8017, which is the version required to be able to use the clone plugin. So now we're going to create a user that we're going to use to clone and replicate the live data into the cluster later. So I create a user called REPL, and I will identify with a password called password, and I require SSL. Now I will give him the right privileges: run replication slave, backup admin, and clone admin. So as you can see, we are now using the X protocol, but with the X protocol we cannot install another plugin from it. So I will show you that. So if I try to install the clone plugin from this session, right, it will fail. So this is how we install the clone plugin, and it says from another plugin protocol I'm not able to install a plugin. So for that I need to connect again on this server using the classic protocol, so on 3306. Same password. So now I am in 3306, so classic protocol, we can see it here. It has protocol version 10, and I can connect to it, and I can now install the clone plugin. So for this single instance we are right. Now we're gonna install a new MySQL 1, that will be the first node of our cluster, the first member. So I install MySQL community server. Meanwhile I will install the RPMs on the next 2 other members that will come later, MySQL 2 and MySQL 3. This is just to save time and install all these RPMs. So as you can see, I installed MySQL community server. MySQL community server has group application and all what we need. So we can see that application is still running, so we will try to reduce the amount of downtime of our application while we do this migration. To avoid DNS issues, right, I will add in my etc hosts of my servers the resolving of all the IPs and the names. So I will modify etc host here, and I will give them all the IPs from all the nodes, even the local ones, so MySQL 1, MySQL 2 and MySQL 3. We're going to add a single machine, so our current production in this list 2. We do that on all the members, all the servers that are part of the architecture, or that will be part. So we are done with that, we can test it, resolving works fine. So now it's time to clone the live data, our production data, to the future primary node of our cluster. So for that I start again MySQL, so it will initialize it on the new installed machine. It's done. By default, you know, MySQL is now secure and create a new password for me, so I need to get it. This is the temporary password for root user, so I got it. Now I will connect using the shell that I need to install, so let's install MySQL shell. I will install the same package everywhere, so it's done. So okay, now we connect using the shell on MySQL 1. So just installed machine and MySQL started. I will put the new temporary password. I go in SQL mode. Of course, it told me, okay, you need to change the password. Let's change the root password, and I will put a new password. Up. Done. Let's test the password. Perfect. So now I will enable GTID like I did manually on our application MySQL instance, but of course I could have avoided that doing directly the configure instance from the shell, but at least I show you how it works if you need to do that on a non-cluster, for example. So just exactly the same. So we of course persist all the settings to remain persistent after reboot. And meanwhile you can see the application is still running. There are still stuff happening on the server. It's very fast, so you don't see that much. So now we can clone it, right? we connect again on the classic protocol, because we will have to install the clone plugin again. On this one too, we haven't done it yet. So we are in the classic protocol. We install the clone plugin. Just one statement. So we can see that here we don't have our production databases yet. So we're gonna try to clone, but we're gonna see that we are missing one setting. So let's see, please. We use the user we created to do that, to do the cloning, and it will fail. Let's see, because we need to give it the donor list. So our single machine is not yet in the donor list. So we're gonna add it there. And now we can clone it. And you will see it's very fast. We can see the clone process, it's already done in the application database. So now we need to reconnect, and it didn't really work. Why? Because the root password that we were using to connect is not the same anymore, because we are using the one in production. So let's change to the one in production, and connect with it. Yes, we are in, and we can see that now we have our production database already in the system, which is SBTest. We can verify some information about the clone operations in the performance schema table. So we have the status and the progress. So all that information is there. Here the database is not that big, so it's very fast. So clone progress, clone status are the two performance schema tables used to give you metrics and instrumentation on the clone process. So that's good. We have now our production data in the machine. So now we're going to create the cluster. So we're going to first create a cluster with one single instance, which is MySQL 1, right? So we go back in JavaScript and we just configure the instance to see that we have everything we need. So this was the settings. If we wanted to enable GTID directly without doing it manually, we could have done this before. So I connect using root locally, because we didn't create any password that we're gonna use to maintain or to do all that stuff, to manage the cluster, but we're gonna create one. So we do configure instance, as you can see we need to do TCP, so we need to use 3306 and not the socket. So we're gonna create a new admin account. I will call it cluster admin. Give it a password, secure one. Confirm the password. And now we have. And it says, oh, we need to do some changes. Do you want to do the changes? Yes. We need to restart the instances. Do you want to restart the instances? Yes. So now everything has been restarted. And let's try to reconnect. So we were able to reconnect. So now, as you can see, I am connected to localhost to create the cluster. It is not good to do that, and it's not nice to do it with root, because root can only be connected to localhost. So let's use the user we just created. So I use cluster admin, and I will connect to MySQL 1 because now it resolves correctly. So we are sure of that because we put it in etc host. So I connect using cluster admin, the password, I am connected. Now I can create my cluster. So I do dba create cluster, give him a name, and it's done. So now we already have our cluster, and we can verify this by doing a cluster.status and the cluster object we have, and we can see we have one node connected. So now we're gonna add the two other members to have a full HA solution. We need 3 nodes. Let's add the other nodes. So we have installed MySQL on the 2 nodes, so the packages and the shell. Now we're gonna start MySQLD. So it will do the initializing, create the data dictionary, create all needs, and we're gonna see it will create some password. Temporary passwords, so let's find them to be able to connect and to change it later. So we have here the new password. Let's cut and paste, use the shell to connect directly in SQL mode. And modify that password that is required, and we add the same as earlier. So now we go in GS, we need to configure this instance, so using the root password, let's do it. Again, the same issue, I forgot to add the port, to not use the socket. I can use the IP, so I'm sure it won't use the socket. I do again option 2 to create that user, because on this machine there is no user created. Give it the password. Let's do the change, let's restart, and it's done. So now let's check the password also on the MySQL tree, so the temporary generated password. Okay, we have one here. Let's do exactly the same. So we connect to MySQL locally on the machine using the shell. I need to do that because I don't have any generic user that I can use remotely, so I need to create that. So I create a password again. Let's connect using that password. No need for the port. Okay, we are almost there. Okay, we are connected using the new password. Now let's go in GS mode and configure our instance. So we create again the new admin account. Please do the configuration change, please restart the node, all it's done. So now I will go back on the MySQL 1 and I will add to the cluster object the instances. So MySQL 2, I give the password using cluster admin, yes, it says which method do you want, because it seems this machine has not the data we need. We said okay, use the clone plugin and add everything we need. So this is done. So we can see all the progress directly from the shell. After the clone, the machine has to restart. It's restarting it. Application is still running, of course. So now we have MySQL 2 already added to the cluster, and we can see that. And we do exactly the same with MySQL 3, the third instance. So we use cluster admin user, we use the password we have, and we also clone directly from it. So the valid donor, all that kind of stuff, it's all generated and all managed by the shell. You can see shell did it, waiting to restart. When it's restarted, it will join the cluster. And now we can see that we have a cluster with 3 members all online, and MySQL 1 is the primary. So now we're going to create this asynchronous replication to retrieve all the data that has been changed since we did the first clone on MySQL 1. So to do that, I will just do we set up asynchronous replication, do change master to single. As we remember, we enabled GTID, so it's very easy. We don't need to find any position, a binary log file and stuff. And we need to use master port 3306, and we give the credentials we created using the REPL user, the password, as we are using GTIDs. We also use auto position, and we use SSL. We did it. We can start the slave process, so asynchronous replication, and we can see the status. Let's make it here more clear. We can see we are connected. We have some transaction to retrieve, of course, all the transactions that happened while we were setting up the cluster. So we can see it here. We can check again where we covered everything, and we can see the GTIDs are increasing one by one here. So now that we have all our cluster running, what do we need to do? We need to set up, bootstrap the router to use the cluster. So to do that, and I will add it in on the application server, which is the same machine as the production database. So here what we're gonna do now, so I installed the router. Okay, so the router is installed now, and what I need to do is to bootstrap it. So configure the router from the cluster itself using the bootstrap options. So here MySQL router, bootstrap. I use one node, usually use the primary, but so using cluster admin, user we created, MySQL 1. I put the user that MySQL router runs with. It's MySQL router, so this is the system user. Put the password for cluster admin. It configure everything and all it's done automatically. Now that we have the router configured, we can start the router. So we use, in this case, systemd. So router is started. So let's connect to the router to our cluster using the router. So 4406, read and write. Put the password. And we can see we reach the primary node. So what's the host name of the server we are connected to? And we will see it is MySQL 1. So let's disconnect. Connect on the other port, the read port. And we can see that we reached one of the secondary nodes, right? So in this case MySQL 3. So router is configured. So now is the only time we will have to shut down the application. So we're gonna do that, and we will restart it using the new port. So we use cluster admin. In this case, remember the grants we gave to cluster admin are not allowed for a full application. So we put the password we have, and we need to use the new port, which is the port for the cluster. But it will fail. So we need to create a user. So in this case, we create a user for the application that has the privilege to connect to the application, and not only from local hosts, from everywhere, because we connect through the router. So we do that. We grant the privileges on SB test to application. So we have a user called application. I give it a new password. So my user is application, and the port is 6446, and now we can see the application is running. So of course we can create the user before, and you can see that the application is running. So the only downtime was stop the application, point to the router, restart the application. That's it. So we saw that it was very easy to migrate from a single MySQL instance to a full HA solution using MySQL InnoDB Cluster, using cloning to get the data transfer from production to the new HA environment, and the router to connect the application. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy MySQL InnoDB Cluster. I hope you enjoy MySQL 8 and the clone plugin. So more info on my website lefred.be and all the MySQL website. Thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye bye.